Good morning and welcome to Agenda. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Ed Lingao. You're watching us via Signal TV 8 or 250 on One News Facebook page and YouTube or via the Signal Play app. You can also connect with us via SMS 0968-704-7736. Meanwhile, it's now time to take a look at the front page of the Philippine Star. The Omicron variant is now in the Philippines. The health department confirms the detection of the Omicron variant in two travelers from Japan and from Nigeria. The two travelers are currently isolated in a facility managed by the Bureau of Quarantine. The National Risk Reduction Management Council activated its red alert status in preparation for the expected landfall of Typhoon Odette. This means that all of its regional officers are virtually connected to its headquarters for easier coordination. Some parts of Visayas and Mindanao are currently under signal number 3. And the palace insists that President Duterte withdrew from the senatorial race to spend more time with his family. The president previously went to the COMELEC office to officially file his withdrawal. This after his longtime aide, Senator Bongo, formally dropped out from the presidential race. Okay, we have two guests lined up for today. Our first guest is, of course, former Defense Secretary Gilbert Gibo Teodoro. Of course, we all remember him. He is gunning for a Senate post under the People's Reform Party of the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago. Teodoro was named one of the 6 senatorials endorsed by Vice Presidential aspirant Mayor Sara Duterte. Secretary Teodoro, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Bilang Pilipino.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Ed, all the televiewers, and good morning, Cito, wherever you are.
Well, sir, it's good to see you back. It's good to see you again. I think last time we saw you was on a different program, at least on this channel. Different program. It was
Yes,
on news as the Chiefs. If I
the
remember, it was in
Chiefs. Yes,
June. I remember it was in June.
yes.
And yeah, yes, sir. You were with you were Congressman Andaya, and at that time there was a different set of talks going on. In fact, you just came from Davao City in the discussion with Mayor Sara Duterte. If you don't mind, can we begin with that? Tell us what happened there, because at that time there appeared to be a different set of plans for Gilbert Teodoro for 2022.
Yes, at that time, Congressman Andaya and a lot of the people who believed in me, and likewise on the side of Mayor Sara Duterte, believed that uh, she would be running for president and I would be a good vice presidential bet for her. Personally, between me and Mayor Sara, the conversation was really devoid of partisan politics. It was between those who believed in us. That did not materialize. And so, amidst the consultation, principally with those who really supported me and believed in me, and other individuals who my family included,
Mhm.
when Mayor Sara Duterte did not pursue her plans, I went through with filing my candidacy for senator under the People's Reform Party.
Yes, sir. Well, certainly, sir. But a lot of people were asking. Well, of course, we know that si Mayor Sara did not push through anymore with
Yes.
her initial plan to run for president. But why did you have to drop out of the vice presidency race? I mean, you could have pursued that, and you could have aimed for a higher office.
With the vice presidential race, in the Philippine context, actually making yourself relevant is really important. And it's quite
Yes.
hard to do that if you're doing it solo without a president. Because I viewed the position of vice president as a sort of an independent director in a bank, which probably, Eddie, you being a part of a corporate network, are familiar with,
Mhm.
where you could provide a third person, connected, although not totally inside, viewpoint of views, and to provide positive policy and guidance inputs and advice when needed. However, you can't do it solo if you don't have the trust and confidence of the president. So,
That is true.
Mayor Sara Duterte's not running has made it unviable for me, no, to continue as vice president if I were to pursue that position and to be of any valuable use to our countrymen.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's true. Pero sayang naman sir kasi siyempre iba pa rin ng vice presidente. Although I know it's not like the US model nga where the vice president
Oh,
also sits in the legislature. Sa Pilipinas
yes,
kasi
as Senate President.
yeah, sa Pilipinas you have to wait for appointment eh.
Yeah. And normally also the Philippine practice, because of our peculiar system, is a vice president is made a member of the cabinet. Now,
Mhm.
I would not have wanted that, because once you're a member of the cabinet, you get so mired in administrative and day-to-day activities that you cannot think out of the box anymore, and your ideas stop because of the number of administrative and daily day-to-day activities that you have to do.
Mhm.
So in that context, as I said earlier, if you don't have a president really that is willing to
Yeah.
accept your role as stated, then it becomes useless. No?
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, sir. I'll move forward to to
Sure.
your agenda for your Senate run. I understand you have I think 7 pillars in your
Yes.
platform. They would
Yes.
include vaccination, education, peace and order, food security, physical infrastructure, the police and military, and reinforcing them, and synergy and cooperation. Let me start off with the one of the most urgent, I suppose, yung tuloy-tuloy na pagbabakuna.
Right.
What do you have in mind for that?
Actually, the vaccinations, peace and order, synergy, and the rest of it. First, right now, we have to act on an ad hoc basis, and we in the legislature, the 2022 budget is really passed, and if ever we in the incoming Congress will have just an oversight function on it to make sure that the funds are applied in a proper manner and in speediest and quickest manner, actually. Secondly, for the future, these can be grouped into one. One is really capacitating our local government, because the problem of the vaccinations is really a logistical one, where
Yes.
it's not an acquisition problem, but really a distribution and administration problem. So number one is capacitating our local governments in order for them to have the capacities to administer healthcare in a safe and proper manner within their areas. And that is their right under the local government code. And amidst consultations with local government officials countrywide, they feel that in the face of, as we see, unspent and unutilized funds in the national government, if these were downloaded or cascaded to the local governments pursuant to performance governance standards, naturally, they could have built their infrastructure, like their emergency and district hospitals, cascaded these into incentives to their barangay officials, barangay health workers, so that assistance could be given our countrymen in terms of the vaccine. Secondly, there's the interconnectivity, the digital and physical interconnectivity that our country really needs. We really need a long-term logistical plan based on quality infrastructure in order to build accessibility, seaports, airports,
Mhm.
bridges between and amongst our islands, and of course, quality roads, which can be done by the LGUs and the bigger infrastructure via a combination of PPPs and government superintended infrastructure. And that should be accelerated. However, the problem is it should be logical and for a long term. And the goal being interconnectivity, not putol-putol, eka nga.
Yeah.
The one pet project here and there. There should really be a logical connection between our physical infrastructure. We go
Sure, sure.
now to digital infrastructure. We hear a lot of vulnerabilities of digital infrastructure in the private sector, but truth be told, billions of dollars have been spent by private sector in order to harden their digital infrastructure. We want to see the same in the government, actually. And if you apply the litmus test from the regulator to the regulated. I believe that the digital infrastructure in the private sector side, I may go out on a limb on this, is way, way, way more advanced than our government, which needs to be more secure, actually.
I
So,
think, sir, I think we all agree on that. I think
so,
we all agree on
so then again, we really have to help the government build up its infrastructure in digital, because in terms of connectivity, in terms of distance learning, in
that.
terms of other key services and cybersecurity, which is a national security concern, this is of paramount importance.
Mhm. But sir, let me
Lastly,
backtrack. Uh,
yeah, sure,
I
sure,
think
please go ahead, Ed.
before you get to the last part, let me backtrack a bit. I understand your point about capacitating the LGUs,
Yeah,
as giving them more flexibility, more autonomy in making decisions, but at the same time making sure that it's all connected, it's all synergized, that it all makes
yes,
sense, that there's a there's a logic in all of it, and it's not one republic going on its own right beside
yeah,
another altogether. But at the same time, you also have to deal with the local government code, and
yes,
we have heard, well, we have also heard about of reports of problems with the local government code and government national government trying to impose its way on LGUs, but not successfully. On health issues, the LGUs are given more authority and more flexibility, and there are times when the national government cannot really impose its will on the LGUs. Another thing is, for example, in vaccinations, a big chunk of the effort is given to the LGUs to do the vaccinations, and sometimes we also hear about vaccines getting wasted, or vaccines undelivered, or vaccines expiring. So, how do you strike that balance? Diba? We know we want to give flexibility and autonomy to the LGUs, but at the same time, you know, the talk about making sure it's all interconnected, it's all synergized, and it all makes sense na hindi kanya-kanyang LGU rin yan.
it should be synergized in the sense of policy, a national policy. However, it cannot be synergized because of the reality that the conditions in each and every LGU are distinct. No, sometimes neighbor barangays really have very distinct conditions, especially geographically, especially in island
World scares.
provinces. And the problem of unutilized and unadministered vaccines could be because of expectations of the national government, which really cannot be implemented by the LGUs because of the state of their infrastructure. So it's like feeding a lot of water through a thin funnel where it's impossible. There will be a backlash, no, and or the funnel may burst. So
Mhm.
that's the balance. First, before you impose a set of standards. For example, I've heard and read that there will be a lot of functions and responsibilities downloaded to the LGUs through the Mandanas law, which
That's
maybe
true.
some
Yeah.
LGUs will not be capable and ready to implement. So there are two ways, perhaps I can think of, for the LGUs to do that. One is to get a hub LGU, a more developed LGU, shepherd the less developed LGUs in their environs, because it is to their interest also, the bigger LGUs, the more advanced LGUs, that their environs be capacitated in a proper manner. Because from there come their markets, from there come people who go to work, and from there also come their problems when in times of pandemics, because people really in these smaller areas will flock to the bigger LGUs. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
And secondly, also, is really the default function of the national government to be the second responder when the LGUs are overwhelmed. And in that also, the national government also, because of lack of capacity in both sides, is also overwhelmed. So these issues really need a fine balance, and it needs close cooperation between the executive through the Department of Interior and Local Government and the LGUs. Plus, region-wide, there's the Regional Development and Control Development Councils, RDCs.
Sorry.
There are
Yes.
several peace and order councils which can be put to active use rather than being their recommendations being disregarded or put in the back burner. I think these are vital issues that really need to be addressed. On the other hand, accountability also is of primary importance. However, those that are seeking to put standards for accountability should put practicable and fair standards that can be applied for all, and not ivory tower standards that only the most pristine of institutions can institute.
Yeah, yeah, hindi puro theoretical lang. Sir, but would you see the need for amendments to the local government code to make sure that everything is smooth? And because the local government code, 1990 pa yun eh. You're looking at what, 3 decades already since it was passed. Do you foresee any need to amend the local government code to make sure that it's all smooth in terms of the synergy between national and local government?
For me, I'd hesitate to put amendments immediately. Let's see how the Mandanas law works and what happens to the LGUs, and then let us go forward. Because right now, the issue really is in given a current state of affairs with the local government code, the IRA share and other benefits that can be cascaded are not being cascaded. So
Yeah.
it's a question really of oversight in the General Appropriations Act that such funds are truly cascaded, and adequate consultations in major infrastructure are made with the LGUs concerned.
Mhm. Sir, let me zoom into your number two. Yung reforma sa edukasyon. What exactly do you have in mind?
Yes.
We're going into what we're already in year two of face to face. I know it's a lot of issues in education are still centered, unfortunately, on the pandemic, and eventually we'll have to move forward from that. Pero the more immediate one, of course, is yung pandemic situation in the schools. What do you foresee for educational reform, at least in the immediate term, with the pandemic in mind, and then moving forward to medium term plans?
With the pandemic in mind, I thought it would have been a golden opportunity to retrain and to reacclimatize our teachers actually to higher technical competences and higher quality or content of what they teach. And actually, it's really high time that we transition, start the transition, at least in phase stages, from paper textbooks. And we should review the content of those textbooks to have higher capacities for our children, and having more technical skills the younger they are, particularly also in functional language. No,
Mhm.
I thought it would have been a golden opportunity for them, because they could not really teach in the early part, to retrain and to retool the skills of our teachers, because they are really the basis of all educational reform programs. Secondly, also, on the other hand, on higher education, I'd like to see more investments by the government and the incentives for the private sector to invest in research and development, not merely focusing by our universities and colleges on immediate deployment for the job market, because we need a lot of research and development in order to make ourselves a player in an innovation society, no, rather than an outsourced destination. Those are the two basic pillars on both ends of the scale that I'd like to see. And I know that there is free tertiary education. However, it
Mhm.
should really be based on merit. Secondly, I'd like to do away with the mandatory master's degree programs, because a lot of what is expected of master's degree graduates in career positions can really be filled by in service schooling to keep up to trends. No, master's degree programs should be based on a dissertation, which will really uplift scholarship in a field, especially the doctoral programs. And master's degree programs should really be based, if it is free, is based competitively on what our country needs. And our country's needs are not merely technical, but even in the humanities. For example, in international relations, it is really important. International law, being a maritime nation, it is truly important that we have expertise and scholars in this. But even in other countries, this is not a quote unquote sexy field. But our country really vitally needs it for the future to have planners who will form the backbone. And I think this point is important also, Ed, that when people talk of government, normally they think, Juan de la Cruz will think, sino iboboto ko? Mayor or other position. But we
Mm.
forget our bureaucracy. Our
Yeah.
bureaucracy is really important because that spinal cord should be the continuum between changes in political atmospheres and administrations. They should provide the stability that the country needs so that services are not hampered. No? And you
Mm.
should motivate them and give them the chance to be educated in the best institutions abroad. They will come back. The fear before was that they would not come back. They will
Yeah.
come back. They will. Balik Scientist Program, for example, I was pleased to learn that a lot of our scientist scholars have come back and tried to help out in this crisis. So
Mm.
on both ends of the spectrum, it is content which I'm focusing on, and I'd like to focus on, especially in history and the facility for more technical skills, which I don't possess. That's why I became a lawyer. Actually, I'd like to see more technical skills in our children, and a more modern approach to education. The textbooks
Mhm.
cost a lot; they are fragile, and we do not know their content. So I'd like to investigate, and I'd like to look further as to how these can be replaced for more functional, more durable, and more usable things for our kids.
And that's a perennial problem. Textbooks are a perennial problem. Not just the volume of textbooks that are available, but the quality of the content. It's always coming out. But sir, you also made a good point a while ago when you talked about the bureaucracy. Everybody's so focused
Yes,
on politicians who come and go. The bureaucracy
yes,
stays because the bureaucracy is the continued. It represents continuity in governance. So
yes,
these are the ano ba yan, in the armed forces kumbaga sila yung mga major at from sargento hanggang major.
yes. Kasi pag umabot na ng above, let's say, full colonel, ano na, iba na yung considerations for promotion. That's already the draw of the straw. Kasi nga,
Yeah.
numinipis na yung hierarchy. And you're really correct. At yung bureaucracy talaga, kung baga sa armed forces, yan ang mga senior NCOs natin na talagang nagpapatakbo, no? Because
Mhm.
they control the people. And in the armed forces, tuloy-tuloy ang skills upgrading nila. Hindi naman kinakailangan ng master's degree dyan, depending on the policies of a Secretary of Defense for promotion, no? So, especially in what we term, there's now a Typhoon Odette coming in. Our
Yeah.
DRRMOs should really be capacitated, should have the skills ready, not only for response, but together with our for environmental planning in areas na kakayanin pang environmental plan, because other areas it's extremely difficult to environmentally plan because the structures have been there since time immemorial. It will really be difficult for historical reasons and for social reasons to redo them. No,
Mhm.
maybe new ways and means can be discovered as to how to make these areas less vulnerable in times of continuous rain or natural calamities. So the bureaucracy is absolutely important in our Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of National Defense, for example.
Mhm.
Skills are important, and it's particularly telling in the Department of National Defense kasi pag nagpag-uusapan yung national defense, the armed forces is given almost total attention because that resonates in the mind of the public. But we need to remember also that services are given 5 agencies by the Department of National Defense, and its plantilla is only about 380 to 400 people. So it is almost physically impossible for the department to manage, no? So these things that build into the future of our country should need to be improved and strengthened at this time. Capacity building is really necessary.
Yes, sir. Sir, napag-usapan na natin yung yung armed forces. I-segue ko na diyan because that involves two of your seven pillars, yung police and military and yung peace and order. Let me start off with with what your proposals are, what you have in mind in terms of addressing issues with regard to insurgencies, with internal conflict, whether it's the local communist armed conflict or extremist groups in the Philippines. What do you have in mind?
Well, really, it is the eventual amendment of Republic Act 8551, which places the principal responsibility on internal security on the armed forces of the Philippines rather than the Philippine National Police. Now,
Mhm.
before we amend that, we have to make sure, too, that the Philippine National Police is ready to
Yes.
accept the type of conflict that terrorism or insurgencies wage, which will involve non-traditional police, or it is not crime fighting, but crime fighting taken to another level to include really bigger personnel sizes per company level, unlike a police department in a city or a municipality. And quick response is also necessary. Now, concomitant to that, we have to ensure that there is an honest to goodness disciplinary mechanism for the Philippine National Police, where their officers also can take the lead in accountability and command over the men, women, and non-uniform no, men and women under them, the uniformed personnel. Because right now, under the civil service laws and rules, I think the men responsible for disciplining their underlings are hampered because of these rules. On the other hand, on the armed forces, of course, then it should continue its capability upgrade to transition to external defense, to
Yeah.
include cyber. Right now, everybody is looking at frigates, multi-role fighters. However, we have to step up the game to cyber security in that level. And my experience was there is no uniform code of military justice. So we have to institute one. We have to legislate one if it is necessary to do so, in order for there to be a decent manual for courts martial, and the rights and obligations of our men, women in uniform are also laid down uh, on an even keel.
Mhm. Sir, let me back up a bit. You spoke about RA 8551. I do remember there was an administration when internal security was reverted solely back to the PNP, and the AFP was only charged with external defense. I forget lang which term, whose term that was. It was it
Yeah,
under Ramos? Was it under Gloria?
I
But
think I think it was under President Ramos. Then they re-amended it to go back
yes,
to the armed forces because
yeah,
they saw that the PNP was not capable at the time of doing so, because the PNP had just been born and just been separated from the armed forces, from the Philippine Constabulary at the time. So there was, before 8551, there was unity of command, basically. And when the PNP was civilianized, they felt, actually, it was Senator Biason who was talking to me about it, that they had to reintegrate it and move it back to the armed forces. But right now, since the PNP has grown in size and strength, and the armed forces is on a capability upgrade track to face mostly external threats and to assist in pandemics. then I think it is high time to review whether the PNP can handle it. If not, we have to capacitate the PNP in consultation with them and the local government officials who shall have supervision over the PNP as to what is the best way and the fastest way of achieving this handover.
Sir, you were no, you were defense secretary before. I do remember that. I think you were 2 years in the defense portfolio.
Yeah.
I bring it up kasi it looks like exciting times these next few years for the AFP. We have so many well, new toys coming in. I understand there that we will be having our own brand new attack helicopters coming in from Turkey. Of course, we already have our lift, our lead-in fighter trainers. Hopefully transitioning later on to MRFs or multi-role fighters. Where do we stand right now in terms of defense capability for the AFP? How do you see the next few years? And do you have any targets for our? I'm talking to you like you're the defense secretary, but in the ideal, in your mind, where should we be by for example 2025 at par with which country in Southeast Asia, and then 2028, for example?
Actually, there are horizons. I think the long plan for one of the branches of service is 2050. Actually, China's plan, actually, if I may name so, is by 2050 it should be this. Our horizon is 2030 and 2050, as far as I know. I may be wrong. However, we cannot really equate our defense spending with any other country or be at par with any other country, because our neighbors, save Brunei, have been heavily investing every year since the start of their independence of an average of about 3% of their gross domestic product on their armed forces, not only in terms of size vis-a-vis population, but also in terms of equipment. So our armed forces actually, given the fact that we are an archipelago, is small per as a percentage of capita of a population rather, vis-a-vis our other countries. But this is to be expected because we're an archipelagic country anyway. It's 80% water, 20% land. So I'd like to see more investments actually on our naval and Air Force resources. But then again, I have to state that our cyber capabilities must be built up maybe even faster than the two traditional services, no? Because these are really the looming and emerging threats, and it goes also to education and R&D. One of the pillars that I would really like to institute is the ability of the government to invest in emerging and disruptive technologies. As we saw in 2020, other countries, that's why they're ahead of the line in terms of vaccines, is that their governments invested billions of dollars actually in technology that was, at the time, there's a big risk that nothing positive would have come out. So in exchange for that risk, they go at the head of the line in terms of vaccines availability. The Philippines does not have that capability to invest in emerging technology, maybe in a small way through the Balik Scientist and other programs. But we want to see, particularly in security, because you have to be invested at source wherever these resources emanate from. The best technical capabilities and research institutions and private companies who naturally also, this is a sticky issue, will compel you to enter into NDAs where you really cannot disclose the details of the technology, because then it can be poached and it can be breached by others. Secondly, also, for example, the biggest example is the way we're communicating now. The internet really was an investment by the U.S. Department of Defense long time ago for their internal communications. Tesla, the battery, which is the most expensive and the most important portion of the Tesla vehicle, is the battery, which was funded by a research grant from the Department of Energy of the United States. So our government needs to be able to have the flexibility of doing that, which Singapore did. That's why they're ahead of the line. And they have the facilities also for research. And we have a lot of universities, both private and state, which can be receptacles for true research and development and investments by our government into emerging and disruptive technologies.
Tsaka sir, magaling ng Pilipino talaga eh. Nakagawa nga tayo ng I love you virus eh.
Oo nga. Hindi, magaling talaga basta na-harness mong mabuti kaya nga nangyayari ito. May iba naman talaga pasaway kahit na merong receptacle ito, gagawin talaga ito kasi you know, you can't stop it. Pero kung may receptacle sila,
Yeah. Yeah.
tama-tama. Hindi lang yun
Yeah.
kahit sa sports nakikita natin, 'di ba nag-iiba yung dagat yung ating mga champions sa chess o kung saan-saan kasi nga wala ngang sapat na insentibo na maiwan
Oo,
dito.
walang mapuntahan dito.
Walang
That's why they
mapuntahan.
Hmm.
Oo. O kung may mapupuntahan, hindi sapat na insentibo para maiwan sila dito compared sa mga offers sa kanila sa abroad. And we can't just raise our hands and say, hey, we surrender. Healthcare workers, for example, how can you stop them if the incentives elsewhere, which means a better life for their families, can be are offered, no? So we really should build our capacities locally to attract people to remain here because before the pandemic, there's freedom of movement. You could vote with your feet. No, right now, of course, it's a bit restricted. However, there's freedom of movement, which is guaranteed by our constitution.
Okay. Sir, I'm sorry, we're almost out of time. Can I squeeze in one last question? Pero politika naman.
Of course,
Well, you are running for center under PFP. You
PRP.
were in PRP, People's Reform Party, and you're also endorsed by Mayor Sara Duterte. But who is your president?
The
Is it
PRP still has to make that decision. I'm waiting for the council to make a decision, and I'm sure they will make one soon. And I hope that this issue is resolved soonest, so we can go on full blast for what we need to achieve. Achieve unity, achieve national synergies, and achieve an administration that will be ready, no, when it comes in at day one to be running and on the ground na hindi na kailangan sana mag-aral pa at mag-transition pa na matagal. Kasi kailangan talaga natin ang mabilisang trabaho dito, lalong-lalo na hindi natin nalalaman kung anong mangyayari in the coming few months. Kasi yung nagkaka-variant to, on the positive side, itong Omicron variant, although mas nakakahawa, sinasabi nila hindi nakamamatay. No? Not as deadly. But then again, there will be other threats that will come which we don't know and we should be prepared for. Secondly naman, we should be prepared for competition between and amongst our neighbors. Kasi yung spirit ng tulungan, nakita natin, although sinasabi ng mga bansa, especially yung WHO, tulungan tayo dito, pero kanya-kanyahan talaga nangyayari, no? So, it's the race na ako muna. Kaya dun sa karera na yon, kailangan mauna tayo.
Sir, sir. Before I let you go, let me drill down some more on that question. Is Bongbong Marcos going to be your president? I know you just said na PRP yung magde-decide, pero of course you would have your own preference. Or are you going to leave it completely to PRP to make the decision as to who your president will be?
Ako, ayoko naman pangunahan ang PRP because they have to understand na ako ang pinakabagong membro nito, no? I do have my preferences and I feel comfortable with a lot of people. BBM, of course, my father and his father worked together for a long time, but that does not exclude also others who I can work with, no? So I'll leave it to the PRP. Because everybody, each and every politician, I think, should be able to work with each other right now. This is not a time where nakaka ng puso, kulay lang ng shirt na suot mo, minsan
Bawal.
nababrand ka na ang laki ng division ng country, sana naman wag nang gano'n. Naka-divide na nga tayo ng karagatan between islands, wag na tayo magdagdag ng division sa ating mga puso.
Hmm.
Lalo na ngayon, Pasko, it's the season na magkaisa tayo, Pasko at Bagong Taon.
Okay, good answer from former Defense Secretary and Senatorial Bet Gilbert Teodoro. Sir, maraming salamat and good luck in your run.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Sito. Merry Christmas to each and everyone, and may we have a bountiful New Year ahead.
Ingat po. We will just go into break, so please stay with us. Good morning. After weeks of sequencing, the Philippines has confirmed its first cases of the Omicron variant in Philippine shores. Now, what does this mean for the country and what can we do to prevent it from spreading? We bring in this morning Dr. Maria Consorcia Lim-Quizon, or Dr. Conky, field epidemiologist and member of the National Immunization Technical Advisory Group, or NITAG. Ma'am, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, Ed.
Normally kasi nakikita kami ni Ma'am sa gabi dahil sa the Chiefs. And,
No,
umaga pa.
I don't know.
Ma'am, okay. Of course, first thing on the agenda, yung confirmation ng Genome Center na may dalawa nang nakapasok as early as November 30 and December 1. Let's try to give it some context first, if you don't mind. Kasi we've been talking a lot last week and a half about itong Omicron variant, and now it's finally here. what should people keep in mind, whether it has to do with the health protocols, or whether it's time to panic, or whatever? Ano yung nuancing na kailangan matandaan ng mga tao?
Ang kailangan matandaan na mabuti ay meron naman tayong pangsangga kahit na papano, no? Number one, katulad niyan, itong 15, 16, 17, meron na naman second round nung pabakuna, no? So talagang ngayon, more than ever, please have yourself vaccinated at yung mga nabakunahan na, go for booster. Doon sa mga maari magsabing, hindi available. Although that is not true, ha? Sa buong kapuluan natin available na mga bakuna. Bukod pa doon sa bakuna, let us continue to practice yung minimum public health standards natin.
Ma'am, okay. We're all trying to contextualize kasi yung Omicron I mean, we're hearing plenty of stuff going around. It's more transmissible, possibly less severe symptoms involved here, and possibly meron ding vaccine escape. Ngayon, I think just this morning naglabas ang WHO ng epidemiological update na preliminary evidence indicates that vaccines may be less effective against infection and transmission linked to Omicron variant. So, of course, ang consequent question yan is what do we need to do in terms of vaccination? Of course, we want to get vaccinated, pero in terms of boostering, for example, does it still make sense to wait for 6 months, or is it time to ask for a shorter interval?
Oo. Well, number one, ang sinasabi is, the good news is the vaccines still work. No? Bumaba nga lang ng konti yung effectiveness niya sapagkat nung ginawa itong mga vaccine na to, hindi naman nakatutok dito sa variant na to. So, bumaba, but they still work. So, yun ang pinaka-importante na dapat nating matandaan. Okay?
Wala pa rin
Tapos,
palusot. Wala pa rin palusot. Kailangan pa rin pabakuna.
kailangan pa rin pabakuna. At
Wala pa
kaya
rin
nung
lusot.
una ko sinabi kanina, hindi naman natin sinasabing hanggang bakuna na lang tayo. Hindi ba
Yeah.
kahit naman nung wala pang Delta, wala pang Omicron, sinabi natin na yung bakuna may katapat pa, may kasabay pa yan na face shield, social
Mhm.
distancing, and so on, yung dati natin pinapractice. Tapos yung pangalawang dapat natin isipin para dito sa Omicron nito, no? Although initially sinasabi ng mga eksperto na mukhang mild or asymptomatic ang dinudulot niya, no? Pasasaan ba kung transmissible ito pagka sabay-sabay, halimbawa nahawa ang 1,000,000 tao, pagpalagay mo ng 1,000,000 lang ang tatamaan na serious or critical, ilan pa rin 'yun? 10,000 katao pa rin 'yon kung sa 1,000,000, hindi ba? Kaya it still is very much source of concern kahit na sabihin, karamihan daw ng mga nagkakasakit mild lang o kaya
Mhm.
asymptomatic lang. Wag pa rin nating menos-menosin. Kasi kapagka nagkasabay-sabay at 'yun ang ayaw natin mangyari, yung magkasabay-sabay yung magkakasakit.
Mhm. Yun nga kasi baka maging kampante yung mga tao dahil doon sa lumalabas sa balita na, mild and asymptomatic lang yan karamihan. Pero
Mm.
with a population of 110 million, kahit karamihan ay mild and asymptomatic, yung minority can amount to several million nga, sabi ninyo, and
Oo,
you can still
oo.
overwhelm the hospitals.
Exactly. Tatandaan mo kahit itong original strain na sinasabing 5% daw ang posible magkaroon ng severe or critical illness. Di kung may 1,000 nagkasakit, ang 5% nun is 50 na katao. O gawin mong milyones yon. Di katakot-takot talaga. So, even though sinasabi na mild or asymptomatic, meron pa rin porsyento na maaring tamaan yung mga vulnerable group. Kaya pagkakataon, no, hindi parati na siya 100% yung mga A2 and A3. Even though nagro-roll down tayo at lahat, sana po yung mga hindi pa nagpapabakuna ng mga senior citizens at may comorbidities, please, now more than ever, ngayon ang dapat na pangalagaan natin ang sarili natin.
Ma'am, I was looking last night at the numbers in South Africa. Grabing grabing increase nila ng new cases. Early November, they were hitting mga 200 to 300 new cases ng COVID per day. After 1 month with Omicron, tumama sila ng 37,000,
Oo,
almost
oo,
37,000 new cases in
oo,
one day. So from
oo.
200 to 37,000,
Oo, oo. Eh,
inconceivable.
kasi the very fact na bago ito, 'di ba? Pagka may bago, alam mo smart itong survival of the species. Smart
Yeah.
naman itong mga virus na 'to, eh. Kung nakikita nila na yung dati nilang, tinitirahan or ang habitat nila, unti-unti karamihan sa mga tao napoprotektahan, gagawa yan ng paraan para, "Teka nga sandali, mag-mutate nga ako, magkaroon ako ng variant para noon mag-adapt ako uli at banatan ko na naman yang karamihan ng mga yan." Kung kaya't, it's not unusual, eka nga ni Tom Jones. It's not unusual na transmissible at maraming mahahawa. Nakita natin yan sa Delta. So ito ang ibang variant. So ito na naman yung cycle na maraming mahahawa at mabilis.
Sorry ma'am, tinamaan ako sa Tom Jones inyo na reference, eh.
Natawa ka tuloy. Flashback ba?
Ay hindi, hindi. Tatay ko kasi ano, eh. Anyway, pero ma'am, okay, again some context, kasi, we're looking at actually at, we're actually looking at delayed reports, eh, kasi because of genome sequencing nga, that does take
Mm,
time, eh. So you're looking at
mm,
the entry of positive, people with Omicron nung November 30 and December 1. So in other words, the virus has been in the Philippines, for more than 2 weeks already. How
mm,
confident are we, or if we can say with any confidence, to begin with, na ito lang yung Omicron dito sa bansa? Or is it
Oo,
possible that
oo,
may
oo.
kumalat na ano, na ilang victims ng Omicron?
Oo. Well, nobody can ever say 100% kumpiyansa, hindi ba? Pero kasi naman delay lahat, eh. Bago nakalampag or the warning bells were rung, may kumakalat na, for sure. Kaya sinasabi nila nung biglang nag-surge na naman sa Europe, maybe ito na 'yon. And Europe actually said na they're looking at ang dominant, variant na mga nagpopositibo sila pagdating ng January is most probably itong Omicron na. So, hindi maikakaila na baka may mga nakalusot. Subalit, ah, ah, the numbers na natatanggap natin ngayon, whether it's Delta, Omicron, or yung ordinaryong uh, COVID, the fact remains na pababa ang number of cases natin sa Pilipinas.
Mhm,
So, we must be doing something right. So,
mhm.
ituloy lang po natin kung ano yung ginagawa natin na something right, kaya pababa ng pababa ating mga kaso.
Okay. Ma'am, let me zoom into some of the vaccines and yung initial findings at least ng efficacy ng mga vaccines versus Omicron. Kahapon kasi Octa Research, they had a go negosyo affair, and in that affair they talked about ano, some of the apparently initial findings ng, I think it was UK, agency, health services agency. They had a study, for example, about Pfizer and AstraZeneca in terms of Omicron. Ang initial finding nila was that, after 6 months, the Pfizer vaccine, those who got the Pfizer vaccine would only have 30% efficacy na lang against the Omicron variant for mild and asymptomatic. Pero meron pa silang
Mm,
70% efficacy
mm,
against Omicron,
mm,
for severe,
mm,
and critical, symptoms. So apparently, okay pa naman siya. Booster lang ang kailangan. I
mm,
think what was more concerning was, what they said about AstraZeneca. Ang sabi kasi ni Father Nico Siaco yesterday was, in terms of, AstraZeneca, after 6 months, 5 to 6 months, zero na yung efficacy niya versus Omicron. And I suppose that would be a cause for concern for people who took AstraZeneca.
oo,
I don't know what data we have on that, eh, kasi, again, I'm quoting second-hand sourcing, eh, si Father Nick, eh. At the same time, it came out on Bloomberg din yesterday. um, the Hong Kong University study showed na, insufficient or not sufficient yung antibodies generated by Sinovac against, the Omicron variant. It's a very small sample study pa lang, very very small.
mm,
So very initial pa lang 'yon. So just to put context there. I ask these questions kasi, a lot of people, a lot of Filipinos got Sinovac, and also a lot of Filipinos got AstraZeneca. What should they keep in mind, and how seriously should we take these studies, or are these very initial talaga, that we should not
Okay.
put too much weight in
Okay.
them?
Not too much weight, Ed. For example, the Hong Kong study has a sample size of, I understand, 30.
25
Okay?
na nga ata.
How can you generalize milyones and bilyones of doses given on the basis of 30, hindi ba?
Yeah.
Pero binibigyan tayo ng idea na it might not work. But Ed, even when we started vaccination in February this year, dynamic yung researches dito. Alam natin na hindi cast in stone yung mga una nating kaalaman tungkol dito sa vaccine. Kung kaya't mahalaga din yung mga nalalaman natin ngayon, ano? Pero hindi sapat para magpanik tayo para sabihin na, hey, wala naman palang kwenta o ganito. The fact remains that the vaccine, as we have them right now, are still protective of us. And we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. Hindi lahat itinataya natin doon sa bakuna. Kaya nga sinasabi natin, may iba pa tayong armas. Yun nga minimum public health standards. And most importantly, yung frontline defense natin, na sarili natin, na keep ourselves healthy para hindi tayo talaban ng virus.
Doc Conky, sorry, I just got advice from the producer. We just need to take a short break, but we will come back with you po. So please stay with us. Okay, we're back with our suke, Dr. Conky Lim-Quizon of NITAG. Doc, are you there? Yeah, nakangiti yung Doc.
Okay.
Okay. We'll move on from Tom Jones. Doc, of course, ang reference sa maraming tao would still be Delta eh.
Yeah.
Kasi matagal na rin yung original Wuhan virus eh. Isa't kalahating taon na yun eh. Since then eh. Yung Delta was only this year. So let me try to use that as a peg of sorts. From what we know, how does Omicron compare to Delta? Well, infectiousness, ang sabi nila, mga times 4.2. So that much is clear. Pero how does it compare to Delta in terms of symptoms generated by Omicron? Is it more severe? Is it less severe? Is it just the same? I asked that po kasi we had experience already with Delta, and that was the most recent experience. So para lang meron tayong reference, meron tayong benchmark.
Well, generally, yung mga sintomas na mararamdaman mo regarding this COVID is pare-pareho, flu-like symptoms. Ngayon, nasabi nga, ang naobserbahan nila, at least sa South Africa, is that medyo mas mild or asymptomatic itong sa Omicron kesa sa Delta. Okay? Kung sa isang banda, mas nakakatakot sa spread kasi wala kang nararamdaman eh. So nagkakalat ka nang hindi mo alam.
Yeah.
Right? So yun
Yeah.
yung nakakatakot doon. Pero doon sa severity so far, ang sinasabi nila is that it certainly is less severe with the patients that they've seen. Yung presentation niya is less severe than the Delta or even yung original na COVID. I think just 2 days ago that one of the international news agency has reported na meron isang namatay sa UK
UK.
na na ano na Omicron. So, kasi naman Ed, sabi ko nga sa sa 1 milyon na kataong mai-infect,
Yes,
kung
yes.
1% lang diyan na magsi-severe, di ilan pa rin 'yun? 10,000 pa rin 'yun na may severe. So
Mhm,
meron at meron pa rin. Kahit sabihin mong by and large it's going to be mild or asymptomatic, may tatamaan pa rin ng severe.
mhm. Well, Doc, we're almost out of time, eh, pero let me leave you, let me let you have the last word here. Anong magandang tandaan, para sa mga Pilipino ngayong magpapasko, ngayong dumating na si Omicron, what should, people keep in mind? What should they remember? First thing on their mind
Okay.
dapat parati.
The Omicron is a clear and present danger, okay? And we have the capacity to arm ourselves with vaccination and practicing the minimum public health standards and taking care of ourselves. So we can still have a Merry Christmas, but also being mindful and vigilant of the Omicron virus.
Okay. Good words from Doc Conky and Tom Jones. Doc Conky, maraming salamat po for joining us this morning. At ingat po kayo parati. And Merry Christmas po.
Merry Christmas, Ed.
And that's today's agenda. Keep it here in Signal TV channels 8 and 250 for the latest news. I'm Ed Lingao. We are on news.